All right, so good morning, everybody. Last week, PTM was sharing with us the importance of tilling our minds, of letting God break up the soil of our hardened hearts and allowing Him to get inside each of us with the life-giving water that only Christ can give us. We learn that the fear of the Lord is a good thing, that God uses both the terror of who He is and that He is so other than we are, and our realization that we've sinned against so great a being, but also the awe that He inspires within us, that draws us to Him by His love and His mercy towards us. And so this week, as we prepare to celebrate our country's independence, I thought it would be important for us to take a closer look at the relationship that we have with our Maker and the kind of government that we live under as Christians. But before we do that, I wanted to take a moment and look at our own history as a country, because I believe this may help explain the situation that we are in now as a country. I believe this is why so many people, especially in the United States, find it hard to put their faith and trust in our great God. So let's see who paid attention in American history class. Without getting too deeply into it, as a people group, what kind of government was our country operating under before the Declaration of Independence was signed? Anyone? What was that? Bueller? I didn't hear you. A monarchy, right? A kingdom, right? We were underneath a kingdom which was ruled by George III, and it would be under his rule that the 13 colonies, right, would be established, which would eventually become the United States. It would be because of his harsh treatment of these 13 colonies by taxing them greatly without allowing them any representation that the colonies would eventually rebel against the king, beginning with the Declaration of Independence. Now I want to read a portion of it to us here, and I would encourage you all to read it in its entirety. But here's what it says. It says, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when, and you probably could quote this with me, I hope you learned this in school, when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the clauses which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is our forefathers of our country. This is what they wrote in their address to the monarchy that they were getting ready to rebel against. Now I want us to hold on to one part of that document. The part where it says they were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That means that these rights were given to our forefathers by someone. It means that we did not give ourselves these rights. These rights were not just someone's good idea, but rather they were endowed upon us by who? Our Creator. I want us to be careful, though, as we examine this document, because this document is not Scripture. While it is a part of the great history of a great nation, it is not Scripture. It does not carry the authority of Scripture, nor does it have the power of Scripture. And while I, and most likely you, put this document into great reverence because it would be the start of a rebellion that would end creating this great nation that we live in, it is simply not Scripture. These are not the words of God. So why would I share this? Especially when we're about to celebrate the day that this document was signed and sent to King George III and effectively making the start of a great nation. Am I being un-American? Do I not like the country that I live in? Of course not. I love our country, and I would be willing to give my life to defend it. But we have to recognize where the true authority in our world lies, and it is not within our government or within our nation. Far too many years now, our country has time and time again to follow after the words that are written by men rather than the words that are written by God. And the problem does not lie in the words that are written by the founding fathers of our nation. They wrote these words with the understanding that even though they were creating a free government which would be ruled by its people, that it was not without accountability. The rights that we have been endowed with come from someone, and that someone is our Creator. When the Pledge of Allegiance was written, it was written with the understanding that we are one nation under God. That means that our nation is under the authority and the accountability of our great God. And that we must live by the words of our great God as He has inspired men to write them in a collection that we call the Bible. While we live in a free nation, we still serve a kingdom. This then begs the question, if we are serving a king, then how can we be living in a free nation? Hear what Paul tells us in Galatians 5:13 through 15. For you, brothers, were called to freedom, but do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. Rather, serve one another in love. The entire law is fulfilled in a single decree: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you keep on biting and devouring one another, watch out, or you will be consumed by one another. Paul says that we've been called to freedom, but with one important caveat, that we do not use the freedom that we have been given to satisfy the cravings of our flesh. And first, it's important to note that we've been given our freedom. God, even though He is our sovereign, has given us the freedom to choose. Through His word, though, He has also given us instruction on how we should use the freedom that He's given us. Paul tells us that it is to serve one another in love. But Jesus takes it a step further and tells us not only to love our neighbor as ourselves, but to love our God with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength. Paul gives us a warning that if we keep on biting and devouring one another, that we're going to be consumed by one another. And so today we're going to look at that freedom, what that means as citizens of God's kingdom. We're going to look at how God intended for us to use our freedom and how not to use our freedom. And we're going to look at what it means to love our King with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And in the end, it's my hope that we will see what God's intention for our nation is and how we can fight the good fight just as many of our forefathers did to keep this great nation free. Only this time not free from another nation, but free from consuming each other from within our nation, and to use our freedoms as God has intended for us. So let's get started, all right? Paul told us in verse 13 that we should be using our freedom to serve one another. What does that mean? What does that look like? In the Bill of Rights, we have been given the freedom of speech. This means that when we see injustice happening within our nation or our community, that we have been given the freedom to speak out against it. We have been given the ability to serve our fellow man by speaking against things that could hurt us as a nation. We've been given the ability to persuade others who might be acting in their own self-interest or following after their flesh and not serving the needs of the greater community at large. But the Bible tells us that we must do it in love. Matthew 18:13-17 tells us this: if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be as a Gentile or a tax collector. Our government and electoral system is designed to work just like these scriptures. If our brother whom we have elected to serve us sins against us, then we must go to him and tell him his fault one-on-one. Call your congressman. If he doesn't hear you, bring along a witness. Call your congressman and your senator. If he still will not hear you, tell it to the church. Call the media. If he still will not hear you, then treat him as a Gentile or a tax collector. Vote him out. What about each of us individually? We have been given our freedom in order to serve. And if that is the case, then it begs the question, how have we individually been using our freedoms to serve our fellow man? Each of us must take a look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what have I done to make this country a better place? If all you can see in your life is that all you have done is taken from this nation and not served it in any capacity, then maybe it's time that you try and find a way to serve. Let me be clear on this. Serving does not mean helping out with the thing that is our own personal agenda. There are lots of people in this nation who make the mistake of serving for fulfilling the lust of their own flesh. Serving means doing something that will help the nation and the people around us as a whole, not trying to mold our fellow human into the person or the thing that we want them to be. If we see someone or something in distress, then we should be helping and serving, not pushing a political agenda. For example, if a child is starving, we should feed it. If a person has nowhere to live, we should help them find shelter. If our brother and sister is going through a tough time emotionally, we should be there with an open ear and a strong shoulder for them to cry on. If they are not believers, then we should help them find a relationship with the one who brings them true freedom. We should not, however, be using their time of crisis as a means of pushing a political agenda. Matthew 23:11 tells us, "The greatest among you will be your servant." If we want to be a great nation, then we must serve, and we must do it with humility. Jesus gave the example when he washed the disciples' feet. John 13:12-17 says this: when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. When we find ourselves in positions of power or influence, then we must use those positions as a means to serve one another. If we do not, then we are using those positions as a means of satisfying our own flesh. Look at your life. Where do you have power or influence? Are you a supervisor at your job? How can you use your position to serve the people you supervise? Are you a blue-collar worker? How can you use your position to help your fellow worker or even your boss? Are you a parent? How can you use your position to serve your children so that they grow up to be respectable adults? Are you a child? How can you use your position to serve your parents around the house or serve your friends if they need help? We are all in a position, no matter what our station is in life, that allows us to serve. And when we serve, and only then we will be great. Imagine if everyone served instead of only taking things. What a great nation we would be. So then what is the other side of the coin? We can also use our freedom in ways that are not so good. Not good at all, maybe even evil. Galatians 5:13 and 15, we read, that we read earlier, I should say, it warns us against this. It says, for you, brothers, were called to freedom, but do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. But if you keep on biting and devouring one another, watch out, or you will be consumed by one another. If we're using the freedom that has been purchased for us by Christ as an opportunity to feed our flesh, then we've missed the point. Our lives are not meant to be self-serving. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been involved in some kind of outreach within the community or some kind of community help type of an event? Right? Maybe even gone on a mission trip. At the end of the day, or days, if you're on a mission trip, was that not the best feeling ever? Right? When you went out and you served another human being and you came to the end of that day, that was a good day, wasn't it? It was a great day, right? Didn't you feel wonderful that you had the opportunity to help someone change their life for the better? When we serve our flesh, the opposite happens. Have you ever worked really hard to get something for yourself, only to find that when you finally had it in your hands, that the happiness you received from it was very short-lived, or maybe you just didn't get any joy out of it at all? This is what happens when we use our freedom to serve our flesh. Right? Have you ever stabbed somebody in the back to get that next promotion? And then after they're destroying their career to get it, the promotion didn't make you happy. In fact, it made you feel worse than you did before. When you got there, the job wasn't all that you thought it would be. And you found yourself stressed out even more than you were in the position you were in before. And now you've lost a friend over it as well. Our flesh likes to distort things in our minds. It is one of our enemy's favorite tricks. He will take something that God meant for our good and distort it in such a way as to make us think that we want the thing that God told us we couldn't have. God told us we couldn't have it because it was for our good. But the enemy tries to convince us that God is just trying to keep something good from us. We become the 2-year-old child that has a tantrum because we won't let him put a fork in the electric socket. Right now, we're living in an America that is full of 2-year-olds who are throwing a tantrum because they can't stick their fork in the electric socket. God has told us that many of the things that the people of our country are doing are not good for us, but because we have freedom, some of our fellow citizens are using it as a means to serve their flesh, not even realizing the danger that they are putting themselves and others in. In His Word, God told us not to be drunk. That's in Ephesians 5:18, which means not to take substances for recreation in quantities that will alter our minds. And yet, we have passed laws to make it legal to consume these substances. Leviticus 18:22 says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, or with a woman as with a male. It is an abomination." And yet, we have used our freedom to pass laws to say that this is okay. Deuteronomy 22:5 says, "A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all who do so are an abomination to the Lord your God." And yet, we have used our freedom to pass laws that endorse this kind of activity, which has even gotten to the point now that we're even trying to indoctrinate our youth and our children into these sinful behaviors. And now people are going to hear these words and they're going to say, "I'm a bigot." No. I just care enough to keep a 2-year-old from sticking a fork in an electric socket. So how did this happen? And why is it happening? It's happening because as a nation, we have decided that we know what is best for ourselves. And we have forgotten that we have a God that actually knows what is best for us. Imagine, to use the 2-year-old reference again, that your 2-year-old, because you have allowed him a little freedom to choose, he walks up to you and he tells you that he has decided that he is only going to eat cookies for every meal going forward. In your 2-year-old's mind, this is a good thing. He likes cookies. Cookies taste good. So in his mind, cookies must be good. You as a parent, on the other hand, know that it is not good for your child to only eat cookies. So you tell him that he has to eat things that are good for him, so he will grow up healthy and strong. Upon hearing this news, your 2-year-old throws himself on the floor and starts kicking and screaming, yelling, "I want cookies!" And you have come to this argument with your child because as a parent, you've given him a little freedom. And then he decided to use the freedom that he's been given to make a choice that is not good for himself. As a parent now, you have 2 choices. You can allow your child to eat cookies until he gets a stomach ache and let him learn from the consequences of his choices, or you can correct his bad choice by removing his freedom to choose and only giving him food that's good for him to eat. The first choice is easy for you as a parent, right? But hard on your child. The second one is hard for you as a parent, but puts your child on a path to better health. A child simply does not have the maturity or information to make good choices for himself. He needs a parent to guide him and teach him how to make good choices so that he will continue to make good choices as an adult. This is the state that we are in as a country. We are a country that has been given the freedom to make some choices on our own, but like that 2-year-old, we've now pushed the boundaries of our decision making and have decided to make some poor choices. We want to eat cookies for every meal, so to speak. We think that we are mature enough to choose for ourselves what is best for us and to disregard all that our Father has told us to do. The truth is, because we don't have all of the information that there is in the universe to know, that we simply cannot make those choices for ourselves. Like a good parent, God has all of the information, and he gave us guidelines to live by so that we will grow into spiritually healthy adults. He has given us those guidelines through his word. Unfortunately, many of us know his word, but have decided we want cookies. And we have thrown ourselves on the floor, kicking and screaming. So what are we to do as a country? Just like as with many 2-year-olds, once you get them calmed down, you can explain to them why it is so important that they eat good foods and things that are good for them. And most times they will listen and learn. A lot of times an older sibling can help with this by showing them that they have gotten big and strong by listening to their parents. And this is our job as the church. We explain why it is good for us as a country to follow after God and his word. And we can demonstrate how it has been good for us in our lives to do so. Every once in a while, though, you get a stubborn 2-year-old who just wants his cookies no matter how bad they are for him. It is at this point that the parent has to step in and limit what the child eats to only what is good for him. And this sometimes will have to involve some sort of punishment if they will not do it. Why? For the good of the child, of course. Just like earlier when we talked about the child trying to stick the fork in the electrical outlet, the child must be stopped from doing that, or he's going to harm himself. As a country, we must be stopped from following after ourselves, or we too are going to harm ourselves. So how do we do that? We trust God and we trust his word. Our forefathers knew that this was the only course for our country. That's why it's in the Pledge of Allegiance. We are one nation under God. We must then make our laws and the things that govern us to be under the teaching and the authority of God. I'm not saying that we need to be a theonomy, where we are governed much like the early Israelites were. That did not work because then people in leadership used the law to manipulate other people. We need to use the freedoms that we have been given through the government that we have been given to elect leaders who will make laws that will follow after God's direction for us found in the scriptures. A lot of us are lazy. Let's admit it, we're lazy. A lot of us are lazy. We see what's happening in our government, and we do not get off our butts to do anything about it. Won't even travel down to the voting booth and cast a ballot. Who here is called a congressman? Anyone? Not me. Right? He has. There we go. Jerry's not lazy. The rest of us, no. Yeah. But this is what I'm saying. If we are to have a country that is under God, then we can't be silent anymore. We have to speak with our votes. Just like a 2-year-old that's free to play and have some freedom, we too can enjoy the freedoms so long as we do so within the boundaries that will keep us safe, healthy, and happy. A happy child is one that can play within the boundaries of safety and security, knowing that they have a loving parent keeping them safe. We live in a democratic republic, but we still serve a king. Our king is a good king. He is a king above all kings. We may not like what he tells us to do, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have the authority to tell us. We may not like the consequences he allows us to face because of our poor choices, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have the authority to allow us to face them. Our laws are only laws based on the one who has the authority to enforce them. Jesus has the authority and the ability to enforce the commandments he gave us. Fortunately for us, there are only 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Our King loves and serves us like a good parent. Jesus said, "The greatest of you shall be the servant of all." We have a King who is humble enough to serve us all, while he is the greatest of all. We embrace Jesus by following his commands, because his commands are for our good. We embrace Jesus because he has the authority to enforce his commands and to keep us safe. You know, we'll all kneel before him at the end of our lives. But why wait? Why not today get into your prayer closet, open your ears, and kneel before your King?